around for 27 years. We've been around the block, seen all the changes that Microsoft has gone through. So we know a little bit about Microsoft, right? We know what's going on. We've done over 1,300 projects, and that's over the past 5 years, including the last 22 on top of that. So we've been partner of the year the past 2-3 years. We're part of Microsoft's Inner Circle. Out of the 4,000 partners they have, we're top 5%, right? So we know what's going on. And I hope you kind of get to hear and see our experience from Derek and Evan. And right, so we do the full stack of Microsoft. This is everything in between: Dynamics 365, ERP, CRM, anything with the cloud, Power BI, Power Automate, Power Apps. So if you have any questions, we can get back to you. And again, we appreciate you attending. And I'm just got to hand over control to Derek and Evan.
Okay. So my name is Derek Finlinson. I've been working in the Dynamics space for about 10 years. So started out doing GP, Dynamics GP actually, and then got into CRM. I've been doing CRM development since CRM 2011. So been doing a lot of integrations, did a lot of work with some e-commerce and integrating the ERP systems and lots of migrations and other things like that.
Thanks, Derek. I'm Nevin Anderson. I've been with JourneyTEAM about 6 years, and I've got a number of years in Dynamics as well. Been working with Dynamics since the 2011 version, and lots of years with CRM prior to that, and have some enjoyable times working on integrations, and especially as we work with the field service product that Microsoft has, we have a lot of reason to do integrations with that. So that's kind of the topic of the day, and why I get a little bit passionate about it, but only a little bit. So the point of our discussion today, hopefully we'll figure out, all right, what are we using to integrate? Why do we want to integrate? And how do we select the best tool for the job? So as we look at Dynamics 365, it can do a lot of things for a lot of people. Depending on your reason for implementing Dynamics 365, you'll have a different reason to integrate with a system than somebody else. So the tools have to be able to handle a lot of complexity, and so we'll talk about tools that can handle simple problems and tools that can handle more complex problems. So first off, let's talk about why we want to connect to other systems a little bit. You might be participating in a system migration. That is, you've got a lot of data in a legacy system, and you need to either replace that system or upgrade it. You need to get that data out of the old and into the new. So you need a tool of some kind to move that data. You might have
I was going to see a lot of that too, just moving environments, right? A lot of people are moving from on-premise systems into the cloud, so that's a common use case for migrations.
Yep. So you might be integrating, which is generally lower data volume than a migration, but you expect it to happen more frequently. And with the tools we talk about today, we can go from batch integration, timed integration, all the way to almost like real-time integrations. And so we'll talk a little bit about tools that can do that. You might want to connect to another system for purposes of data validation. Think about address validation. Think about cleaning up legacy systems. So when we connect Dynamics 365 to some of these third-party systems, we turn on their integration, and then they can kind of suck out some of our data, clean it up, and push it back to us. And another reason to integrate would be for decision support. And you might think of, a data warehouse, Power BI is something that's inside our wheelhouse. Is our Power BI team works a lot with us in the Dynamics side. And so that's an integration. Luckily for us, Microsoft has that built out, and we don't have to make too many decisions about how to do that. All right. When you are connecting with those third-party processes, what might they be? And this is somewhere, Nathan, where I think our numbers allow us to maybe have us pull the crowd just a little bit. I want to know if these ring the bell for you guys, and or if you have some more unique, maybe something we don't mention here in this list. So just type it, put it in the chat for me. Do you do e-commerce and EDI? Are you connecting to a third-party e-commerce partner? Maybe you have a payment provider. At JourneyTEAM, we've used various ones and find that a lot of companies need to take payments immediately. Some have deferred payments. We'll do it sometimes on the CRM side, sometimes on the financial accounting side. You might integrate with a third-party marketing tool. Our favorite marketing tools are built in. They're just part of Dynamics, but you might have a favorite that's a third-party tool that has an integration to Dynamics. Payroll, sales tax calculation. We've worked quite a bit with Avalara, and they provide a great service and make it easy to calculate your taxes in multiple tax jurisdictions. Commissions, look at expense recording, expense capture, and finally time and attendance. Do those ring a bell with you? Love to get some feedback from you guys, the reasons that you're looking to integrate Microsoft Dynamics with the rest of the world. So if you like, just throw those in the chat. All right, I'm seeing Jesse. You wrote Oracle. Tell us a little bit about that if you can unmute.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
With it. Yep, we hear you.
Yeah, so I don't know that this is the type of integration you're referring to, because I'm not the tip of the spear when it comes to this with our instance, but we have what we call an integration, very basic, in which we pull prospects from Dynamics 365 and then use that information in campaigns that are sent out through Eloqua. And then that feeds back in so we can record basic activity on it. Now, again, I don't know if that's what you're looking for, but that's kind of how we use it. Yeah,
it's perfect. And is that a first party Oracle type integration, or do you guys have to pull that, kind of build that yourselves?
So this is something that was built by our team.
Yeah.
But we're always looking. One of the points of interest is getting back to more native functionality, and particularly anything Microsoft. Not that we're necessarily unhappy with Eloqua and immediately looking for that, but in other areas, we have some XyWave integrations as well that are, again, not perhaps true integrations, but where we're hosting some information within Dynamics, and have been happy with those. But as we look to expand our Dynamics use and truly harness its power, hoping to get more into the Microsoft, back to that kind of native functionality that plays nice.
Well, we'll talk about a few technologies today, and you probably identify, oh yeah, that's what we use, or maybe that's how we did it, and maybe something else will catch your eye and say, well, maybe we could do it that way. Appreciate you sharing. And then I'm going to butcher it, I'm sure. Lawrence is the last name, but is it Keon?
It's Sean.
Sean. So did I mention that I was going to butcher that?
Yes, you did.
Yeah, good job.
You are in good company, sir. So,
no, thank you.
No, I just put just event attendance and consultation. That's another thing that's just it's not on your list, but
Yeah.
I work with a CDFI, and yeah, we do finance, but we also do consultations and track people who attend our workshops and whatnot. And so it is one of our ever present complexity is, tracking clients, across all of the different streams that they come interact with us, whether they're
Yeah.
strictly on the business education side or they're overlapping clients, or they're
Are they
strictly on the loans and loan applications
are
side.
those kind of one-on-one things that you have to schedule, or are they
Yeah,
group
so one-on-one
courses?
consultations, sometimes
Yeah.
it's group consultations. We have people who come to Eventbrite or go to webinar
Right.
or Zoom, right? And we have people interacting with us in lots and lots of different ways,
Love it.
right? And so multiple definitions of what constitutes a client, right? So
Yep.
that's one of our challenges.
Well, thank you, Sean. And now I've learned a new way to spell Sean, and I appreciate that. So we've seen we've integrated with things like Eventbrite, and typically we look at that as kind of a marketing kind of integration, and then also there are third party tools that allow us to integrate in for like one-on-one consultations as well. And so I think we're not going to necessarily go over those specific ones, but I've seen those before. We've worked with
Yeah.
those, and I think you're in good company using Dynamics for those kinds of things. I'm going to jump out of the chat and jump back to my slides. I hope you guys don't mind. Thank you for your participation. So let's talk about a few of the tools that you can use for integrating. Now, these are general purpose tools that allow you to move data in and out of Dynamics 365, and really focused on the CRM component, right? Call it CRM, call it customer engagement, Dataverse. These are the tools that we primarily use for that being one end point of the job of the work. So we'll talk a little bit about Excel, using that for importing and exporting data. Power Automate, otherwise known as Flow, a Microsoft tool. Dataverse has its own set of built-in integrations. We'll talk a little bit about that. A couple of different Azure tools, and we'll review some of the choices that JourneyTEAM's made about tools to use for importing data into Dynamics and communicating with other systems. APIs. This is depending on the audience. This could be incredibly boring or just interesting. Canvas apps, if you've heard of them, great. You probably know about Canvas apps if you've spent much time in Microsoft recently, but they're kind of new on the scene. Then we'll talk about third-party tools that are general purpose tools as a group. We don't want to get into too much detail about them, but then we will go in depth on KingswaySoft as we get into our in-depth section near the end.
I'm
So
going
let's
to go back
first.
to that slide.
Yes, sir.
So to kind of bring up a point of what Jesse brought up about being more like in the Microsoft stack and being kind of first party. So back originally, the main focus was the main tools you use is those third party ones, Scribe, KingswaySoft, or you just import Excel. I think in the last few years, Microsoft's put a big focus on bringing tools into their ecosystem, into the Power Platform, that you can do it all from within there. So like the Power Automate, Dataverse, those logic apps and functions, those are all kind of newer features that have had a lot of focus from Microsoft, so that you can just have everything all in one ecosystem and not have to go to third-party solutions.
Yeah, and a lot of it available at very little or no extra costs. So yeah, Microsoft is trying to and doing a good job enhancing the value of the stack wherever they can. Was that good? Should I move forward, or did you have more to say on that, Derek?
Nope. Yep. Go ahead.
Okay, so first, we want to talk a little bit about Microsoft Excel. Now, you guys probably know that it's really easy to get data out of Dynamics using Microsoft Excel. Just export to Excel or export to an Excel template. But fewer people know about importing. But this is the button they put on the forms. So it's very easy. It's very accessible. It's fairly easy to troubleshoot errors. And this is kind of level one. Everyone should know how to use Microsoft Excel as a tool for importing data into Dynamics. So you get a lot of ease of use because everyone has used Excel at some point, or almost everyone. It's low cost since almost everybody already has the tool. And while you may not, you don't even have to use Excel to import data. You can import from a CSV file. I guess I'm speaking of Excel as a shortcut to desktop database or data file import. So CSV or Excel format, you can use either one. And it's great for loading that initial migration data. You can use it for loading up the results of third-party marketing campaign results, those kinds of things. Import a batch of new leads when your marketing partner comes up with those leads. This is a good tool for that. We're going to go over some tools that will make something like that a little quicker, a little easier, and more automated. But Microsoft Excel does make it kind of easy, especially if you already know Excel. All right. Power Automate. I expect that almost everybody in this group, if not everybody, has heard of and knows about Power Automate. So this is the renamed, rebadged Microsoft Flow. Flow has a ton of connectors, lets you connect with just about everything out there. Or maybe I overstate it, but it gives you an easy, step-based, no code needed way to connect between Dynamics 365 and lots of other tools. We've actually written entire integrations, enterprise level integrations, using Power Automate to connect Business Central and Dynamics 365. And so it works. It's reliable, and one of the great things about it is that it's very low cost. Now, this system, you probably don't want to use this tool for high levels of high volume integrations. And if you're moving a lot of data, you'll run into some limits with it, and Power Automate will want to shut you down. But where you have lower volumes, it's a tool that you can use to connect up systems. And of course, not just dynamic systems with a variety of connectors. You can connect to lots of third-party systems, and even third-party just SQL-based systems.
Yeah, what's really cool with it too is they've got you can make just HTTP requests. So you can, if you don't have a connector for it, you can just make straight API calls to other systems if you need to.
Well,
and you
now
can
I
also develop custom connectors if you have something you connect if you don't have a connector for already.
And if you have a good developer who can help you through with that. Derek says, oh yeah, you just develop a custom connector. Yeah, exactly.
And on that data limit it mentions there, so the flow is just comprised of a bunch of steps. All right, you've got, here's your trigger, and we'll go over this more in a bit, but just your steps in your flow. So that 20K limit is the number of steps your flow performs per day. So you can do 20,000 actions per day, which sounds like a lot, but if you're running the same step, running 10 steps through a loop for 100 records, that's 1,000 steps right there. So as Nevin was saying, if you have high volume, then Power Automate is probably not the best choice.
Yeah, and it wouldn't be a stretch to have 10 steps or 20 steps.
Yeah.
And so, yep, that can go away pretty quickly.
And I think we had another session today talking about it was robotic process automation, or desktop flows. So not only can Power Automate run flows just in the cloud, but it can automate your manual processes you're running from your desktop, which is pretty cool.
Does get extra cool points for sure. All right, Dataverse. So if you don't know, Dataverse is what they've called that Dynamics 365 common data. Oh, help me out. I'm stuck in the middle of
Common
two
data
names.
service.
Common data service. Yeah, I'm stuck in the middle of two different name changes by Microsoft. But by opening up the Dataverse, maybe they get one step closer to plugging into the metaverse that everyone's talking about recently. I don't know, but inside the Dataverse, this is where your CRM database is maintained, and there's a built-in capability to connect between CRM and ERP, specifically our Dynamics 365 CRM and Business Central. And with this tool, you can pretty much go into Business Central, which is the control panel, flip these on, and at no additional cost, you'll have an out-of-the-box integration. It is fairly simple and doesn't immediately permit you to use custom fields so any customizations require additional coding. But for very simple out-of-the-box integrations, where maybe you want to pass contacts and salespeople and accounts or customers back and forth, even things like sales orders and I believe invoices. There's an out-of-the-box integration for that you can use. Generally, companies that we deal with move beyond the level of complexity that this permits, and so we end up using other tools, but it is available and free. So now we move into the world of Azure. If we were describing Azure to a layman, we might say what, Derek?
Well, it's just Microsoft's kind of collection of cloud tools. So you got like virtual machines, and where your Active Directory is going to be stored. So it's kind of your virtual cloud-based infrastructure.
And Logic Apps gives you kind of a step-based visual environment to develop different processes in, and so you can develop integrations inside Azure Logic Apps, and it is tier-based. The costs are generally fairly minimal, as we've seen for integrations that we've developed here. This is the place or the technology that JourneyTEAM's chosen to build our core CRM to BC to CRM integrations in, and find that it's a good multi-purpose tool that we can use for this. It keeps us inside the Microsoft stack, and the cost is quite low for the end user.
Yeah, so pretty much it's pretty similar to Power Automate. The tooling designer is going to look the same. It just gives you more freedom. You can do a few more things, and go above those limits that Power Automate has on actions and how fast things can run, since you're paying for your own dedicated environment.
Okay. So if you need to go into very complex situations, you can off-source the work to more Microsoft Azure and use Microsoft Azure Functions. And so you don't delve into this without at least having a a development environment of your own set up, and it's still cost is still tier-based or consumption-based. You pay for what you use. What instances would we use Azure Functions in, Derek?
So I've used it a lot before when we need to, get data from a system that doesn't necessarily have a good API that we can get. So if it's an older API, we can write a kind of a middleware on Azure Functions so we can grab data from their external system and push it up either to Power Automate or some other tool. So normally we use it as just in between, so we can get, use it with those other tools.
Well,
not just as a standalone.
That brings us to the topic of APIs. Here we show, APIs are modern program-to-program communication. And if you've ever worked in API development, you have to be able to answer the questions, well, what question do I want people to be able to ask me, and what answer am I going to give? So it's a way to put an endpoint up that'll respond to questions that are posed by remote systems. And we've used this to connect to a lot of third parties. Think of maybe a service management system where they have an API set up where we can ask, hey, what new work orders are we supposed to be working on here in our field service environments based on Dynamics 365? And we can pull in those new work orders and assign them to people in our system, just connecting using that API that's present on the other side. And one of the really interesting things that you can do with these is kind of go into multiple levels of technologies. So you might create an API or use API data and then plug that into one of our other integration tools that we've already talked about. Derek, you might have an interesting use case for something like that.
Yeah, I've had a couple clients where we've built APIs to access their on-prem data. So specifically like banking industry or insurance companies where, they've got sensitive data. They need to keep that on-premise. They can't really put that up in the cloud. So we create an API so that we can query data on their on-premise system and then feed that into our other integration tools so we can pull that data to their CRM system.
Yeah. In all of these cases that we've talked about, all of these tools, what we've been really discussing is the ability to grab data and move it from one place to another for storage. And this next technology, where we talk about Canvas apps, this can allow you to have data movement like capability without actually moving the data. So Canvas apps allow us to, in this integration world, have a view into a third-party application, but put that data, the view of that data, inside Dynamics. So if we don't need to manipulate the data, we don't need to update the records in the third party. All we need to do is view it and use it to guide decisions. Then we can use a Canvas app to go and pull data into a view that we can see in front of us on a screen that's embedded inside Dynamics 365, and then we can make our decisions and manipulate the data that's inside Dynamics based on the input that we're seeing from that third party. So the Canvas apps, while you can end up manipulating data, when it comes to integrations, it's actually a great tool to help us not have to actually move data or pump data from one system to another. It allows us just to view it. You see in the example there, you might use sales data from Dynamics Business Central and just be able to view that in Dynamics 365. Of course, we could move the same data and put it in Dynamics 365. And when it's in there, we could put it on a dashboard, but there may not be a reason to move the data and try to keep it in sync between the systems. So it's lighter weight, saves on storage, and still quick enough to do decision support for us. So sometimes the best integration isn't to move the data, but just to see the data.
And with the Canvas apps, you get a lot of the same connections you have in Power Automate. So you're not limited to only data from Business Central. You can pull data from SharePoint. I think they've got Salesforce and all sorts of other third-party connectors you can use to pull data in. And it's so Canvas app's pretty limited on the interface. So they have these specific controls you can use. So we've also had clients where they did just need to see the data, but they didn't necessarily like the look of the Canvas app. So another option is, if you have development resources or have someone that can do them, you can just create an API from that previous slide to grab your data and then create a custom UI to display that data in Dynamics.
Probably not lightweight development there. Okay, and finally, as we're discussing these tools for integration, wanted to talk briefly about third-party tools. These third-party tools that we've selected here, just kind of it's a variety of tools. There are a lot more out there. We spend most of our time working with KingswaySoft and TIBCO Scribe in this genre of tools, and very useful. They can connect to lots of different systems. They are purpose built for integration. So this is what they do, and they're quite good at it. You can get incredibly high speeds for integration from these tools. Compared to the other tools that we've gone over, these are the speed kings. They're faster. They're also not inexpensive. Maybe for a scribe where you're doing high volume, you could be in the thousands of dollars per month. KingswaySoft will require you to host a copy of SQL Server, and so there are some more requirements, not just being cloud-based and inexpensive to use these, but you get the benefits. You get speed. You get the centralized logging, error handling, retries. So these tools are very effective for integrating, because that's what they're built for. Unfortunately, it does take you out of the Microsoft ecosystem a bit, and then, of course, like I mentioned, subjects you to additional costs. So as we were looking inside JourneyTEAM at what we wanted to use to build our kind of our core integrations between Business Central and Dynamics 365. These are our flagship line of business products that we support. We do the most work on these, and so we wanted to have our own tool set that we could easily integrate with. We just built a matrix, and this is probably something that you would want to do too, as you decide, hey, what's the job that we have to do? Do we need high speed? Does it have to be out of the box? Are we okay with the additional cost? And you can see we built this matrix with pros and cons, looking at licensing, looking at costs, looking at the various use cases for which the technology was the best choice, and then that's going down the horizontal or the vertical axis. And then across the horizontal is where we took a look at each one of the different options we thought would be best for us to use. So we recommend that as you build out your integrations, you don't just start with the one that's right in front of you, but do take a look. You may find that there are additional tools that have been created since you were last aware of the integration tools available, right? New things are released all the time. And we'll even cover one here in a few minutes. In Dataverse, there's a new tool called Dataflow that I hadn't been familiar with until the past few months. So let's jump into our in-depth section here. And
yes, first we're going to take a look at Power Automate.
Derek, you wanted to grab the screen from me, and I.
See if it works.
Yeah, let's see if you can make that request. There we go. I see it. Okay, you got it.
There we go. Cool. Okay, so it's just kind of a screenshot of a Power Automate flow we built to integrate Dynamics 365 with Business Central. So now your flows are going to kind of follow the same layout. So it's just a series of steps. Your first step will be your trigger. So in our case here, we have a trigger that when a record is created in Dataverse, we're going to run our flow. And then you just add as many steps as you need to perform your logic. So on the right there, it's just a list of some of the available connectors. We've got different tiers. You've got built-in connectors that will be, like your variables here. We can add variables to our flows, and you got standard and premium connectors, which would be your connectors to various third-party services or Microsoft services like Dynamics, Business Central, and SharePoint. So you can also add, conditional logic and looping. So here we've got an if statement. We can check conditions and go down different paths and do different things. You can also group steps together. This is handy for error handling, or if you want to do certain things depending on what happens. So these arrows between the steps, those is just, I want this step to run after the preceding step. But you can also configure that to run if the previous step is successful, or if it's skipped, or if it fails. So that's where you can add in your error handling, or just jump your logic around if you need to, depending on what your needs are. Inside each step, you're going to be able to configure that step depending on what it is. Here we're updating a record in Dynamics, so we're able to map fields from any preceding steps and map those into our step here. Each step's going to have its own different configuration and things you can map and pick. So we actually have pretty good logging for Power Automate. As your flows run, it's going to store all your executions and whether they succeeded or failed or were skipped. So you can see there, it's going to store that for 28 days. If we drill into a specific execution, we can see each step. We can open that step, see what the inputs were, what the outputs were. That's useful for troubleshooting or just digging down into what your flow did and what it should have done if it failed. As in the logic apps, it's going to be pretty much the same. The original edition of logic apps, you have one logic app, which was only one workflow. So if you needed 10 workflows, you'd have 10 logic apps, which wasn't a great experience. But they've recently made an update to it where instead you have a logic app as like a container, and then you can add as many workflows to that container as you need. So that lets you group your things together. So if you had an integration from Dynamics to BC, like we have here, you can group all those workflows together in a central location. So those workflows will also share the same connections, so you don't have to create a bunch of connections in these different logic apps. They can just share the same one.
So to be maybe to be helpful or clear, we were in Power Automate or Flows a minute ago, but this is Azure Logic Apps, so it looks a lot like Power Apps with the step-by-step execution here, and it doesn't look, looks like something that I could get behind until you show me that those declarations on the right side.
Yeah.
But Azure Logic Apps does have an expense that goes with it, right?
Yep. Okay. Yeah. So it's based on app service. So if you've used Azure Functions or any web apps or anything inside Azure, it's running on the same platform. They have two separate, I think, 2 tiers right now. So just a standard tier and then a premium tier. So just depending on which tier you're in, this will determine your cost. So into the actual workflow, it's going to look basically the same as Power Automate. You're going to have most of the same connectors. There's a few differences, but everything's going to work about the same. One of the differences is you can actually develop these workflows outside of Azure. So you can do it on your own local machine using Visual Studio Code. And that lets us, this next slide, actually edit the code directly if you wanted to. So each workflow is just a JSON file. And so you go here, copy, paste, move stuff around how you need. And the benefit of that as well is that it lets you store those workflows in source control. So you talked about that as an option on our purpose-built integration tools, but with Logic Apps, you can do the same. You can store it in source control, so you can have multiple people working on it. You can do branching if you're adding new features, and you have kind of that backup of your workflows. The execution is going to be pretty much the same. It's going to store that history here of each execution that ran. You can pull that up to again see the inputs and outputs. Well, one difference is that since it is in Azure and is just an app service in Azure, you're able to connect it to application insights. And with that, you'll get access to additional insights and analytics and reports of how your Logic App is running, how often it's failing, and you can even query to get specific information on those executions. Next one to KingswaySoft. Haven't used it before. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, for people who don't live in it, we're switching products again, and so now we want to look at one of those third-party products, KingswaySoft, and so moving out of Azure, out of the Microsoft ecosystem, and into a third-party application at this point.
So if you're not familiar with KingswaySoft, it is just built on top of SQL Server integration services. So that's just a out-of-the-box offering that's included with SQL Server. And it just adds some additional components and actions and a connection manager to connect to Dynamics. So again, it's going to look familiar. You've got your different steps. SSIS calls these control flows. So just different steps that your integration package will go through. And then inside each of these control flows, you could consider them a workflow. You're going to have your different data flow steps. So that'll be similar to what we had here, where inside of each one of those, we're going to have our different steps that we want to perform. So within there, KingswaySoft adds a source component that lets us connect to our Dynamics environment. Your source, you can pick either an entire table, so you can just retrieve the entire account table. You can put in a fetch XML query if you only want a subset of those records. And one unique thing that is really cool is with KingswaySoft, you can actually pull down your audit history. So you could query your audit history, and it will put those in a little better format than what you get out of Dynamics. So then you could put that into a regular SQL table or other format where you're better able to analyze and look at that audit data. The other component you get with KingswaySoft, next slide, is an option set mapping component. So oftentimes, if you're pulling in data from an external system, it may not match up 100%. So you might have labels that are different in your third-party system what you have on your option sets in Dynamics. So with this mapping, we can create mappings for that, depending on the number of mappings you have, how many options. You can just manually enter them, or if you have a file, you can just import those from a file to map your option sets. So that'll just convert the label from your input system into the required option set value in your dynamic system. The very handy feature having done it in Power Automate and Logic Apps and other places, it's really nice having this so you don't have to kind of manually do it or write some code to map those over. Next, then the kind of the big component they have is the destination component. This is where you map your source data that you're pulling in and map that to a a dynamics table. So here you can do a create, an update, or an upsert. You could delete records and a couple of actions. And depending on what action you're performing, you can select from these various options. So if you're doing a create or update, you're able to send any date time values in UTC. You can have it ignore fields that haven't changed, or remove invalid characters from any text strings. For updates and upsearch, you can also pick the mapping criteria. So if you happen to have matching primary keys between your systems, you can just match on that. Or when you're mapping the columns, you're able to select which columns you want to map on. So for account, you might want to match on an account number or the name if you don't have the primary key. And then where KingswaySoft gets probably its performance from is from these batch and threading settings. So normally with the other tools, you're going to be processing one record at a time. With KingswaySoft, we're able to pick batch and multi-threading settings so we can have it run faster. So there's no real hard and fast rule on what's the best settings here. If you're on-prem, you can basically set it as high as you want, depending on what your hardware can handle. If you're on CRM Online, you're going to run into some API limits. So it's kind of just a trial and error to find out what gives you the best performance without getting you throttled.
Just to mention, though, I mentioned that KingswaySoft is kind of the recognized speed leader. And we've seen records migrating in the hundreds of thousands of records per hour. So very fast. And so if you're looking for very fast, this is pay attention to this part.
Yeah, we've got one client where we're integrating, it's probably just over 5 million records total on a nightly basis, and it takes 4 hours to do all of that. So with
what we couldn't hear because everyone's muted was gasps of appreciation.
All right, got thumbs up. All right.
Good.
Yeah, so Microsoft does have some recommendations. They recommend now that with your batch size, you just set it to 1. In the last few years, they have released kind of their new web API. And with that, I guess they recommend the best performance is for 1, your batch size and as many threads as you can handle. And that should give you the best performance without running into their throttling limits. Over on the right here, we have where we do the mappings. So you map your input column to your CRM field. If you're doing normal fields, numbers, text, anything like that, you can just map them straight across. Another cool feature here is they have this text lookup column. So normally if you're doing a lookup column, you're importing an account and you need to map the primary contact field. You're not often going to have that primary key for the contact. So with this text lookup, we're actually able to look up the record by its primary name field, so just the name of the contact. And if that doesn't work for you, you can also manually specify what field you want to match on. So you can, in that text lookup dialog there, you can pick which field or fields you want to match on. So you can match on 1 or 2 fields. And it will also cache that data. So if you've got multiple records with the same lookup, it'll cache that data, giving you even better performance on that. All right, this is back to you.
All right, guys, we're gonna hustle through this and hopefully have time for a few questions if there are any. So I mentioned that Dataverse has a feature called Dataflows. This is called it's in Dataverse, Power Apps, Dataflows, lots of different words around it. But inside Power Apps we have Dataverse, and inside Dataverse we have Dataflows. This allows you to connect to a wide variety of data sources. You can pump data into Dynamics 365, customer engagement, CRM, whatever we want to call it. This tool is an out-of-the-box tool. Comes with inside the Power Apps editor. You find it at make.powerapps.com. So if you have a current Dynamics 365 instance in the cloud, you can go and find it there. And highly recommend you check it out if you haven't had the opportunity. This is a list of the connectors that you can use to start the front end or to source data from. Note that you have all these categories: file sources, databases, Power Platform as a source category, Azure. In online services, you can connect to web APIs, to web pages. You can connect to OData directly, so that'd allow you to connect to Dynamics Business Central if you wanted to do that. And of course, there are just a wide variety of data sources. We found a lot of value in using this tool. One example is a client who needed to bill through monthly invoices. They receive an invoice from a provider and they need to bill their customers for that. And so using a connection to the monthly invoice, which they received in the form of an Excel file, we were able to completely automate the process of importing that invoice data, turning it into individual invoices for the client. And while it took some significant data manipulation, all of that import is handled through this Dataflow tool, and by significant, it was just hours to set that up. As we move on, part of the power of these data flows is that you can use Power Query tools, and so you have all the power of or potency, I guess, to not be repetitive, of Power Query to edit the source data, prepare it for importing. So you can add and remove columns. If you look in this center section or along this toolbar, add, remove columns, filter rows, replace, search and replace values. The vertical screenshot on the right shows you this series of steps. So this gives you that scripted, we're going to do this every time. So when you carry out a data manipulation, it remembers what you did and just stores that. So the next time you run it, it'll do the same thing. And then on the bottom inset here, column mapping and load settings is where you would select a target table where you're going to put the data that you've sourced and now manipulated into something importable, and you can tell it exactly where to put that. Now, here's a checkbox that adds a very cool feature. Let's say you have as a source a spreadsheet that gets customer survey results, and every time there's a customer survey that's taken, a new row is added to a spreadsheet. Well, when that spreadsheet gets updated and this data flow is run, you might think, well, it's going to just keep putting in, it'll put in item 1, and then when the second item is added, it'll put in 1 and 2, and then 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. Nope. We can tell it, hey, respect the key, primary key, or an additional key, and don't keep entering those. So it becomes a flexible tool for data that comes in drips. And to run the data flows, you can run those automatically or manually. You can do it on a schedule, and you see some of the detailed options here for how to run this. So we've gone over a bunch of tools, used a bunch of time. I'm sorry. The quick summary is, if I can get back to where we are, you want to select the proper tool for the job at hand, and so coming up to knowing the tools, knowing what aspects of the tools are important, and then putting those together in a matrix so you can make the best decision for your application is vital. And so hopefully, as a result of listening in, maybe you've been exposed to some new tools. Hopefully, you've come out with a resolve to always use the proper tool for the job, and understand that different tools provide different features and cost levels that you need to be aware of before you make your decision.